Turns out the mic is like half working, kind of working, good working. Okay, wow, amazing, amazing. The team is space, right? I made something. You know it, like as I scroll, the thing moves. I think it's nice. What's even nicer is that this is just HTML and CSS. It's not JavaScript. There's no library, there's no JavaScript at all. It's all just CSS, and I think that's really, really nice. And I will show you during this talk how I built it and how you can build it. So, play. Yes. What's new in CSS? A lot is the answer. It's an exciting time to be a front-end developer, like really an exciting time to be a front-end developer, because there's a ton of features that are landing in browsers, and I think that's really, really amazing. Admittedly, it's also a very confusing time to be a front-end developer, because there's like a ton of stuff coming to browsers, so it's very hard to keep track of everything. Reason being, well, there's a ton of releases. Every 6 weeks, and soon every 4 weeks, Chrome has a new release. Safari has regular releases, Firefox has releases, and you can follow it along on the release calendar. Like next year, Firefox is going to ship more than 12 releases, which is a lot. And when those new versions come out, well, then you have to check as a developer, you have to check the release notes, like, hey, what's new in this browser and what's new in that other browser? And then when you know that, you're like, okay, but does it, like, the thing in Firefox, does it work in Chrome or vice versa? So then you have to check, like, these types of data things where you can check, like, hey, what's the compatibility of it? And the most common one is can I use? And then in can I use, you type in the name of the feature, and then it says, hey, it's supported in all these browser versions. But that's still a lot to keep up. Like you as a developer, you have to look it up and keep track of everything there. So you might be a bit dizzy after all this because it takes up a lot of your time. Thankfully, though, to make your life easier, there's a bunch of interop efforts. Interop 2022, 2023. Before that, we had WebCompat 2021. And next year, we'll have Interop 2024. Which is an agreement between browser vendors on which features they are going to try and ship that year, so that you as a developer know, like, okay, it's quite safe to use this feature from now on. This is the list from this year's Interop. It had a ton of things on there. For example, Subgrid is on there somewhere. Yeah, Subgrid is over here. And then you can see the score for each and every browser. So this is run against a test suite, and the test suite is shared amongst browser vendors so that every browser gets tested against that test suite. And at the end, we have the interop score. So right now, these are the values. It's a screenshot from 2 days ago, so it's pretty up to date. What's also helpful is that my colleague Rachel Andrew writes monthly blog posts on what's new on the web platform for that current month. She publishes that on web.dev, and I would recommend you to follow that. It's not about Chrome only, it's also about Safari and Firefox and whatnot. So this is like a really good source to get like the gist of what shipped this month in all browsers. And Rachel shares that with you. And hopefully after this, if you see all that, you're like, this is amazing. I don't have to look it up myself. So my name is Bramus. I'm a developer relations engineer at Google, Google Chrome. And I'm also a member of the CSS working group, which is a standards body where all the CSS standards are getting specified. And I'm also a scuba diver. So if you have any question about CSS or scuba diving, come feel free to ask me now. I see an OK sign over there, so that's amazing. It's diving lingo, divers. Yeah, so if you have any questions about any of those, come feel free to ask me. And I'm not claiming that I know all the answers, but maybe I do know some of the answers, or I can point you to the right person who might know the answer instead. I also run a blog, brum.us. It's been up and running for more than 22 years by now. And on it, I post mainly CSS stuff, also some JavaScript stuff, so feel free to check it out. All right, so this talk is about what's new in CSS. Let's take a look at all the stuff that recently shipped in browsers. But before I'm going to do that, I want to show you like a few things that are pretty old in technical terms. Like if something is more than 2 years old, it's old, right? So I need to mention these because these are so helpful and they will save you from writing a ton of JavaScript to achieve something, whereas sometimes you can just use like one line of CSS to achieve the same. And I think that's so great. So the first thing is custom properties. Has anybody heard of that, custom properties? Okay, so that's about 10 of you. Who has heard of CSS variables? Okay, so custom properties is the correct name for CSS variables. It's the same thing. Whereas variables is the feature that we wanted. We all wanted variables in CSS, but we didn't get variables. We got custom properties instead. And custom properties is like the way how it was implemented in CSS. And I think this is amazing because these custom properties that you see there right at the top, you declare them and then you can use them. This is like pretty similar to SAS variables or other variables. You declare them and you use them, and then out comes the computed value. But this is custom properties, meaning they act like properties, which means that you can change them on the fly. Whereas in SAS, you can't do that. In SAS, you have your static token that says the font size is 0.75 EMs. That then gets computed into a computed style sheet, and that gets loaded to the browser, and it's fixed. You can't change the value on the fly. With custom properties, you can do that. So if the screen is a bit smaller, change the values. If it's bigger, well, change the values again, and the browser will update it for you. You can use it in calculations. So you can use one custom property and then use it in the calculation to define another custom property. And this here is to change the width of a book based on the number of pages it has. So as I'm changing here the value in DevTools, the page count, you can see the book is getting thicker as you are changing the values. And I think this is really, really amazing. You can use a custom property to generate color palettes, for example. You have one base color, and then you calculate all the lighter and darker versions from that. This is it applied. You just change the slider, so the base color value changes, and your color palette changes with that. This is so cool for theming. You set one custom property on a div, make it green, and everything inside of it becomes green. So cool. You can also have default values. In case you didn't know, this is like a lesser-known feature. So after your variable that you're referring to, add a comma, and then the default value. So if it's not defined, use that one. And then you can also change it on the fly based on other things. Like here, for example, if a checkbox is checked, then an animation should play instead of being paused. It's like that. So you click it, and then the animation is running. And this is all CSS. It's not JavaScript. And this has great browser support, as you have seen on the first slide that I've shown you. It also interacts nice with JavaScript, meaning that you can read it and set it from within JavaScript, and you can do stuff like this. For example, map the mouse position to an X and a Y property, and then use that, and you get stuff like this. This is a flashlight. It's just using the X and the Y position passed from JavaScript into CSS, and then CSS will draw this radial thing on top of that. I think this is nice. Another thing, 3D hover type of things, again using just the pointer X, pointer Y, and I've also done some other calculations on that as well. So that was custom properties, CSS variables, as we all know them. Next up is space-colored notation. Oh yeah, and fair warning, I'm going to be shooting in the wild like a cowboy here. So I'm going to be like, oh, this is a new feature, and that's a new feature, and that's a new feature, because there's so much stuff that has landed, and it's just like, here it is. So space-separated color notation, difficult word to pronounce apparently. Great browser support. You can drop the commas in your color declarations. Why am I telling you this? Well, because all the new color stuff that I will be covering later on is using this new syntax without the commas. So it's not a typo, it's actually a feature. Aspect ratio, we've all tried to do this, right? We've tried to give a box a certain aspect ratio. Hey, you here, be 16:9, so we set the width and the height, and then we set the padding top because the padding gets calculated against the width, and that's why it works. Oh, that's awful. Don't use that. You can use aspect ratio and give it an aspect ratio. Now, that doesn't even need to be 16:9. So if you have an image that's 8,522 pixels by 7,000, whatever, just put the numbers in there, and the computer will do the math for you, and out comes the aspect ratio. So this is the sensible way to do it. Fair warning with it, though, is it's more of a hint than a forced thing that you are passing into the browser. Because if you have set a width and a height already, and then request an aspect ratio to be applied, the browser is going to be like, no, but you already asked me to set the width and the height to something, so there already is an aspect ratio. So if you use aspect ratio, it will only work if you set either the width or the height along with that aspect ratio. Smooth scrolling, we've all done that. Like if you click on a link and you need to scroll to the very bottom of the page, npm install some JavaScript library, hook it up, on-click handler, or use this one line of CSS. So cool, right? One tricky thing with it, though, you can't change the timing. So the timing is like built into the browser. We're looking into fixing that. Like I want to say, like, hey, if you click and you scroll down, make it last for 2 seconds. We should have that. So smooth scrolling, one line of CSS for now. Scroll snapping. Here's a demo. Like if I scroll, then it like nicely stops at a certain point, and then if I move out, it wiggles back. Again, just 2 lines of CSS. You set the scroll snap type on the wrapper, the thing that scrolls, and then on the element you set where should it snap to, the start, the center, or the end. This also works with boxes of several sizes. So you can have like a square box, a rectangle box, whatever, it will all snap. The browser will figure it out for you, just 2 lines of CSS. I can talk hours about this, about scroll snapping, just scroll snapping, but I won't bother you with it because my dear colleague Adam Argyle has a great talk on it. He gave it at CSS Day 2022. The slides will be online, by the way. All the links are there. So check my blog, bram.us, afterwards. It will be on there. So Adam has a great talk on it. Please, 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 please check it out. It's awesome stuff. And then accent color. We've all tried to like change the colors here of the little input controls of our forms. Again, you can do this now with just 1 line of CSS. Accent color hot pink, and everything is hot pink. Hot pink being my favorite color, by the way. I like it. Who here uses hot pink as our debugging color? Yeah. Red, lime, hot pink and lime. Anything else? Blue? Sorry? Crimson. Ooh, nice one. Okay. Okay, so that was a few of the established editions, like to get us started with all the new stuff. Here's some of the new and upcoming editions. The cool thing is browser support by now for all of these is like pretty much great. Like if I gave this presentation 2 years ago, it was like all red, no browser support. Oh yeah, this is coming. But now it's like, oh yeah, this is in all browsers. So you can quite safely use it. So first one are container queries. Who has heard of container queries? Quite a few of you. Amazing. All right. So with container queries, you can style descendants, so child elements, based on aspect ratio of a query container, and the aspect being a size here. So for size container queries, you can style some children based on the size of their wrapper. If you know media queries, you know how it works. With media queries, you size something depending on the size of the page, like the width of the page. But with container queries, you can say, no, I don't care about the page width. I care about the width of the element where it is in. So if an element is like in a big wide column, the image should go next to the text. But if that same component is in a narrow sidebar column, the image should go on top. Here's a demo. This is all the same component. So here the image and text are on top of each other. Here they are next to each other. The image is bigger. Then here the image is smaller. So this is all one and the same component. The page width remains the same, but the container where it's in gets adjusted. And this is the CSS. We start off with our regular animal card, display grid, whatever. Then on the wrapper, so the parent element of the animal card, we set the container type, and that way we activate size container queries. We set it to inline size. And then we can say, hey, when the container has this width on the animal card, change the gap, change the grid template. Oh, and when it's this width, change it again. And with that, you have implemented size container queries. I'm using anonymous ones here, so the animal card will automatically try to look up like its nearest container parent element. You can also pass in a name if you want, but more details here on this very link. CSS nesting, all green, yes, all green, amazing. We've all been there, right? Like we have this piece of CSS, and it's like a lot of repetition that is going on. Yes, people still use tables. A lot of repetition going on, and then you need to rewrite it. You want to rewrite it with nesting. So you're like, Sass can do this, right? In Sass, I rewrite it like this. So the TD is a child element of the table.color table, and the C is a child of the TD, which is in like, okay, cool. Everybody was like, great. This is a solved problem, right? Like Sass has solved it for us. Ship it. That didn't quite work. The problem is this right here. browser parsers can't understand this. Because when a browser parses a style sheet, it goes through it character by character, I kid you not. So it starts at the very start and goes like, oh yeah, I'm parsing a declaration there, open the parents, okay, so I'm gonna go inside of the block, and when it knows I'm going inside of the block, I'm looking for properties and values. I'm looking for declarations. And then it sees TD, goes like, that's like a weird declaration, but okay, whatever, I'll just go for it. And then space, open the curly boy there, and it's like, that doesn't write, so it can't compute that. We kind of like need to trick the parser into saying like, we're not parsing declarations here, we are parsing nested rules here. And for that in CSS, we came up with this, where you prepend the ampersand there. So that way, table.color table gets repeated and then glued to the TD. Note that here it's not necessary. Why is it? Well, it's because of the dot. Because when the parser sees the dot, it says, oh, this is not a declaration because a property doesn't start with a dot. This is not a declaration, so I can parse that just fine. And yes, admittedly, that's a bit confusing. So our engineers, very clever people, they said, we need to fix that, and they fixed it. So this is the browser support in Chrome 1.12, Safari 16.5, and Firefox 1.17. As of these versions, you will be able to use it just like that. They fixed it, and basically they are giving the parser a kick. Like if it crashes somewhere and says, like, I can't parse this as a property, they just kick it back to the starting position and say, try and reparse it as a rule set. So soon you will be able to use this. These are pre-release versions. Chrome 1.20 gets released in December. Fair warning though, it's not exactly the same as Sass. Internally, this will not be red. This will be blue. So if I do the diff.p and you say, like, okay, diff and glue it to the p, color blue, and then the cascade kicks into action, and then, well, this one comes later, so it will win. It's not the case, because internally the browser will replace the ampersand with the is selector, and then the is selector takes over the specificity of the highest specificity of any of the rules in the rule set. Very complicated, I know. So this doesn't really work. Be aware of that, because this is how the specificity gets calculated. This one has a higher specificity than this selector right here. If you're like, whoa, what's up with these numbers, like specificity? I don't understand it. No worries, I have a talk on that. I gave it at CSS Day 2022. It's a talk about the CSS cascade, so the whole cascade in general, and I would really urge you to watch it. Please watch it. Because back in the day I also told, oh, the cascade, this is so easy. There's a lot to tell about the cascade. It's like 50 minutes of me just talking about the cascade and how it works. So please check it out. The specificity part is at the 12:30 mark, by the way. The slides are also on there. And yeah, I think nesting is great, because nesting is like one of my final steps to be able to drop any type of preprocessor. Like with nesting, I can like mostly just no longer rely on Sass anymore. Here's a few examples where you should use it. So don't try to use nesting to replicate your Damme tree, because that's very brittle, but like use it to group stuff together. Like the focus styles and the hover styles of the A element, group them together in one big block. I think this is a really good use case. Here's another one, like on the fly, change it. Or like, for example, you could use dark mode in here. When it's dark mode, change the color. And the cool thing is, by the way, you don't need this ampersand right here. You can just write it like this. I think this is so cool. So if you want to change colors on the fly, you can also do it with a light dark media query. The has selector, who has heard of that one? I bet everybody has heard of has. This is part of Interop 2023, by the way. So on most of my slides, I have like the Interop tag there. So this one is going to be interoperable by the end of the year, and things are looking good. Firefox is really on track to ship this by the end of the year. So after Firefox 1.21 gets released, I think is the version that is going to be, then we should have cross-browser support. The has selector, also known as the parent selector. People say, oh, this is the parent selector, because you can use the parent of a certain element with there. So with this selector, I select the image inside of the A, but with this one, I select the A element that has the image inside. So I'm not selecting the image, I'm selecting the A element itself. So the parent element of the image element. Okay, here's another one. because you can use like a bunch of things in there. I'm selecting the A that has a direct image child in there. I'm selecting a section that doesn't have a heading in there, and then I'm styling it all very differently. Pretty sweet. Now, I don't agree with the name parent selector. I think it's wrong. I think we shouldn't say it. And it's also in the spec. The spec doesn't say parent selector. The spec says something else. Because here I'm selecting the figure that has a fig caption in there, which is like the parent, okay? But here I'm selecting the figure that has a fig caption, and then inside of that figure, I am selecting the image in there. So you're not just selecting the parent element, you're like jumping up and then jumping back again. And you can jump up the DOM, down the DOM, you can do sibling selections like, hey, am I being followed by a paragraph, yes or no? You can do all that kind of stuff with the has selector, so it's much more than that. Like here, for example, if the H1 is followed by a paragraph, style the H1. So it's not, the H1 isn't the parent of the paragraph, it's a sibling. Very cool. Here's an example where you can do that. So I'm relying on valid here. So if the input is valid, then the label before it, I am changing the label based on the validity of the input that is following the label. So this is the markup, and then this here is the CSS for it. So if it's followed by an invalid or by valid, style it differently. I think this is pretty sweet. Here's another one. Depending on the value of a dropdown, I'm showing another dropdown. So if you're selecting the BMWs, it's going to show you all the BMWs. If you select the Ford, it's going to show you all the Fords and whatnot. Note that this is just visually hiding the other dropdowns. It's not removing them from the markup, but I think this is like already pretty nice to do right. So this is the markup again, one select with many sibling selects. And then here you say, well, if it has the option value 1 that is checked, show that one, otherwise show that one, and so on and so on. It's pretty complicated, I know, but you can do crazy stuff with has. I like it. Here's a demo by Jay, who built like the hover thing, so the dock from macOS. So if you hover an element, it's like styling the next allies and the allies before that based on the hover state. And the CSS basically looks like this. So if you're hovering it, scale the middle one, and then the one to the left, the one to the right, scale it by this, the one 2 times to the left and 2 times to the right, scale it like that, and so on. Sweet, right? You can also do this kind of stuff. Please don't do it. but you can say, if the list item has between 7 and 9 children, then style it that way. If I show this to our engineers, they go like, oh, no, don't use it. This is bad for performance, you really shouldn't use it. And this is also my message to you. So has is really cool, but if you use it like this, where it's like unprefixed, this is basically the same as asterisk colon has. So you have to like traverse the entire DOM to see if that's true or not. So please use has with caution. And yes, we are working on tooling to provide you to say like, hey, maybe this selector isn't really performant on your document, so don't use it. But you can, but maybe you shouldn't. And then color space. I think this is one of the coolest things that is out there. Maybe I need to update Firefox. I'm not sure if that's correct there. But color spaces is so cool. Because this is like the shape that you see there with all the colors. This is all the color that you can visually see, given that you don't have a vision deficiency or something like that. But like these are all the colors that you can see. And then that little triangle in there, that's the sRGB triangle, which are all the sRGB colors. So that means that in CSS, if we use a hex color, we can't use any of these because, well, it falls outside of the triangle, so we can't use them. There's something new because we also have the the display P3 triangle, which is a bit wider. So if I go back and go, you see, the display P3 is a bit bigger. Here's them both on top of each other, and like this is a bit zoomed in. So you see that the P3 one, like sRGB, the greenest green is over there, but in P3 you can have a greener green. Same with hot pink. So hot pink way on the other side, you can have an even hotter hot pink. This is the example. So there is hot pink. Well, with display P3, this is the hotter pink. Cool, right? So how do you define it? Well, you'd say, I'm not going to target something in sRGB or like a function or a hex code. You just use the regular color function, and you pass in the color space that you want to use. So you can pass in sRGB, display P3, and other values. There are more triangles that you can target. And then you give him the values for each and every channel, and then slash the opacity if you want to do that. So there's much more colors to tap into. So which colors resolve to which color space? So all the old stuff, the named colors, the hex colors, are all clamped to sRGB, the very tiny triangle. But if we use any of these functions, so lab, LCH, OKLab, OKLCH, or color, we can target like more colors than sRGB contains. I think this is amazing. Where it also differs is that not only can you tap into more colors, it also changes how interpolation works. Because a color shape is often a cube. It's also sometimes a cylinder. And if you move from one color to the other, you are moving in 3D space. So with the sRGB cube, which is like an actual cube, if you move from this point to this point, you go to like a zone of gray colors in between. And well, you can't see it here on this example, but like with many gradients that you do in sRGB, you get this like grayed out color in the middle, which is not what you want. So in these other color spaces, you have much more cooler effects. I don't know what drugs HWB and HSL are taking. It sounds like they're abbreviations for drugs, but this is not correct one. I really like OKLab because this one is really smooth. It's like consistent. And by the way, also check the little booklet that we have here from Frontmania. Sitnik, the developer, Andre, I forgot his last name, Andre, has, yeah, that's the book over there. There's a good article in there over OKLCH and why you should use it. Please read it. It's great stuff. If you want to know more about colors, I'm not an expert in that, but this person is. This is Chris Lilly, SV Jesus, the husband of... That's his handle, SVG, and then he's the inventor of SVG, by the way. He also won an Emmy. Pretty cool. He has a full talk on colors and color spaces and why they are much needed. He's also the editor of the CSS color specs, together with Leah Veru, his wife, and some other folks as well. So color functions. I've already talked to you about the color function itself to tap into one of these new color spaces. There's more. You can mix colors straight within CSS. Use color mix, pass in the main color, and then say, well, add 10% black in there or 20% black, or maybe 10% white to make it lighter. Pretty sweet. Relative color syntax is also something really cool, where you can say like, hey, you know what, browser? Take this color here, the var color, so which is a hex color, which is sRGB, pipe it into HSL, and then split it up into the H, the S, and the L, and the alpha values, and then manipulate those values individually. So here color gets piped into HSL, the H and the S and the L values are just copied over, but the alpha is adjusted, the opacity is adjusted to 0.5. Here, for example, the hue is rotated, so the H is rotated by 180 degrees. The S and the L components are just copied over, and then here the saturation is changed. This is so cool, amazing. It's shipping in Chrome, let's go back, 1.19, which is currently in beta, so that will be out 3 weeks from now, I think. Yeah, great stuff. Then the viewport units. You know these devices, typically we all have one in our pockets. And if you size something like 100 VH, it's like this, it bleeds out. And you're like, browsers. Or you're like, browsers, come on. What's happening here? It's pretty weird, like why does it bleed out? Here's the thing, if you scroll up and like the dynamic toolbars hide, it does fit in there. So it kind of makes sense, but only in this state, not in the previous state, which is weird, admittedly. So basically we have two states, one where the dynamic toolbars are like expanded and one where they are retracted. Well, we give each of those states a name. We call the one on the left the small viewport and the one on the right the large viewport. And we also have units for that. 100 SVH is this size and 100 LVH is, One caveat with that, viewport units, including the old ones, don't take the size of the scroll bar into account. So if you have classic scroll bars, you're kind of screwed, but we're looking to fix that. Give it time. So you can use these. And by the way, 100 VH is mapped to 100 LVH, so they are the same. And you also have a unit in between. Like 100 DVH automatically adapts itself to the thing being expanded or retracted. Do note that it doesn't update like at 60 frames per second. Like it takes a while. Like you can see a minor jump in there, but it solves an actual problem. If you want to know more about this, this is an episode of HTTP 203 that I did with Jake Archibald, where I talk for 43 minutes about this viewport problem. But I think we fixed the biggest issues with it, and we still need some details to iron out. Individual transform properties. Say I want to scale, rotate, and translate something. Well, for that, I need the CSS transform property to do that. But the problem is that every time that I add a value, like here in scale, I also need to calculate this point and this point for the other ones. So I need to calculate all these extra values, because that's how transform works. In transform, I need to repeat all those transform functions and in the right order. If I change them, don't do that. So I need to repeat them in the right order. And that's a bit stupid, right? Because only these matter. The grayed ones are just copied over from one thing to the other. Or is it vice versa? Oh, yeah. So I'm only translating from 0 to 100%, and then here I needed to calculate these values manually. So that's a bit stupid to do. We've solved that for you. We are giving you individual transform properties, namely translate, rotate, and scale. So you can do this, and this more clearly expresses what you want to do, right? I want to translate from this to there, scale from this to there, and then you can combine. And yes, you can repeat keyframe values there, and you can combine them with commas. That all works. Or you can also split them up, like you can have your move, your scale, and your rotate separately, and then hook them up all together there with different timings if you want, or different durations. I think that this is nice. One note though, the order is always the same. So if you use translate, rotate, or scale, it's always that order. Translate, rotate, then scale. So these two snippets, where these two are flipped, it gives you the same result. So it's going to be applied in this order right there. More on this link. All right, cascade layers. Who was here at CSS Day 2022? Bobby was? Roland? Oh, some more folks. Hi. We've met, apparently. So this is the cascade. When you have a set of competing declarations in your CSS, the cascade kicks into action. Again, please check out that talk that I have on the whole cascade. And if we're really honest, we're mostly struggling with these two, specificity and order of appearance, because most of the times our styles are in the same origin, have the same importance, same context, don't use style attributes, so we are struggling with these two. And this can give us problems, namely, this is in my reset style. Somebody wrote it. OK, cool. Remove the margin and the padding. I want to style the nav element. It won't work, because this one right here has a higher specificity than the one at the bottom. So that's why it won't work. So what I need to do as an author, I need to overwrite this somehow. So I just prepend the UL on there so that it has the same specificity, and then the order wins. And OK, yeah. Or here's another one. This is from a slider component that I npm install, and it does the sliding for me. And I want to change a slider item. I want to change the border color. It doesn't work. Now I could change this selector here to make it have a higher specificity, but if I'm really honest, I just do this. But then we're creating other problems, because this is now more difficult again to overwrite later on. If my colleague at the other side of the building wants to change the color again, we're screwed. Here's another one. I have these utility classes, all great, but they are defined before my card content. So if I have an element with the class card content and uText, right, it will always be left aligned, because this is the last rule that wins. They have the same specificity, and this last one comes last, so it overrides the other ones. The fix is to move things around, but in a large code base, you don't want to do that, because I bet you if you do that in your code base and you just move some CSS around, stuff will break. So please don't. So we're kind of stuck with these two. Oh, we're almost spelling, so it's a problem. But what if we didn't need to have that problem? What if there was an extra step in there, in between, in the middle, that says, you know what, I'm going to pick the winner from the declarations, and you don't need to worry about specificity or order of appearance. And that's where cascade layers come in. So cascade layers is an extra step in the cascade that determines the winner based on which layer a declaration is in. Doesn't have anything to do with layers being painted over each other. This is just like your chunks of code in your CSS. This chunk, this chunk, this chunk, and you give them an order to determine the winner. So you get to slice up your single origin styles into several parts. You do that using the add layer rule or statement, and here you say, like this, and that's how it magically works. And you're like, what? You just added add layer and this works? How come that this works? Well, the cascade layers are ordered by order of appearance, and they are given a priority. So if my style sheet looks like this, with all these several layers, this is the priority. So the first layer has the lowest priority, and the last layer has the highest priority. So that's why in this example, this selector here will win, because reset is declared first, component will override it later on. So that's why it works. I think layers are cool. Yeah. I could tell a ton of stuff about cascade layers. Again, I won't bother you with it because I have a talk on it. So check out this link. It's the same one as the CSS cascade, so you're not having double homework. And this is how a CSS file would look like at the end. You define your layers, you import some stuff into other layers, and then you have your styles right there. I think this is cool. Subgrid. How am I doing on time, by the way? I'm going to check at the back. The nod says all is good. OK. So subgrid, let's check that one out. Here I have a grid and an item and a sub-item. And if you look closely, if you draw the lines, you can use it with your DevTools, enable the lines. You see that the sub-item is like nicely aligned onto the grid of the, not its parent, not the item, but like the grid item actually there. So this is our CSS, like we started for display grid, okay, then the item we lay it on top of the grid, but then what do we do for the sub-item? I'm not really sure what we can do there. And if we do nothing, that becomes this, so it's not really aligned to the grid of the parent.grid, which is a bit of a problem. Well, the solution is pretty cool. You use CSS subgrid, and how do you do it? You, on .item, you say grid template columns and grid template rows is subgrid, which will mean that hey, this item here will take over the grid lines from its parent element, the grid one, and then you can use this position this sub-item within the subgrid, which uses the lines from the parent grid. Amazing, right? Like that. So we see that the subgrid, the numbering restarts, so it's again at 1, 1, and here it's also 1, 1, so we know this sub-item should be laid out at column line number 3, span 2 cells, and then go from 1 to 3 on the rows, so we have these values right here. Shipped in Chrome 118, which is out last week, so amazing. Media query ranges, a short one. This is how we wrote it back in the day, max width 750 pixels. You can also just use mathematical operators there. I'm getting the 5-minute sign, okay. If you want to do like something in between, you use this syntax, which is a bit weird. But if you read it like the width is sitting in between the value on the left and the value on the left and the value on the right, it kind of makes sense to read. Okay. And then add property. Add property is so cool. You could say this is TypeScript for custom properties because you can register a property to be of a certain type. Okay, cool, amazing. So if you try to put a color in there, it won't work because it requires an angle. I don't really like, well, I'm not the hugest fan of this part of that property. I like it, but I like this part even more because when you have registered a custom property, the browser knows how to interpolate it. So if you change an angle from 0 to 360 degrees, the browser will know, oh, an angle, I just need to count up 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on and so on. So my code becomes really simple. I use the angle here, which has a default value of 0 degrees, and if I hover it, change it to 360 degrees. And instead of just flipping from 0 to 360, it will nicely interpolate from 0 to 360 and do the thing. So here, for example, I'm rotating this layer, and this is just with the one animation in there, using the custom property. So cool. 2 more things I want to talk to you about. View transitions. Which allows you to change the DOM in a single step. So you already do that, but you can create an animated transition in between those 2 states with view transitions. So here's an example that Jake built. If he clicks on it, you get like the fade in and the fade out between the 2 views. This is how you do it. You call document.startViewTransition, and in there you have your update method that changes the DOM. So that changes from the overview page to the detail page. And from then on, magic will happen. Like the browser will automatically capture a before snapshot and an after snapshot and move the elements on the screen for you. I think this is really cool. You can target it with CSS. So for example, you can change the duration and say this should happen for 5 seconds, and you get this smooth fade. If you're like, okay, this is cool, but not that cool, check out this demo right here by Maxi Ferreira. This is done using view transitions, so you see like the box grows, the photo moves. I think this is amazing. Go check it out, amazing stuff. The video even keeps playing when he presses back, so cool. Great, right? Again, I have a full talk on it. I could talk for an hour about it at CSS Day. Yes, I'm wearing my swimming trunks right there. It was very hot weather. It was in June, that very hot week in June that we had. And then scroll-driven animations. I think this is so cool. It's supported in Chrome 1.15. Firefox is working on it. Nowhere on Safari just yet, but they are supportive of the specification. And these are animations driven by scroll, running off the main thread, so on the compositor, without the need for any JavaScript. And I think this is so cool. This is like the typical demo that everybody thinks is amazing. And this is no JavaScript. So how do you do it? You create this regular set of CSS keyframes. So you have the photo facing this way, and that way. And then you add it onto the images. And you say, hey, this is the animation. So when you run this piece of code, the animations will run on page load, but you don't want to run it on the document timeline. You want it to be driven by scroll. So what you do there is you remove the duration, because seconds have no meaning here, and then you say, animation timeline, view inline, and magic happens for you. It will run automatically. There's much more to say about scroll-driven animations. I won't bother it with you now because you might have guessed it. I have a talk about it. So check out this one. I also have a website about it, scroll-driven-animations.style, which loads up a polyfill for older browsers that you can use. It contains all the demos, links to videos, and whatnot. And then one last thing, add scope. This is really new, shipped in Chrome 1.18. If we want to target the image there, we kind of have a problem because there's also like an image here. So we can rely on this type of selector where we are very specific about the DOM structure. But if our DOM structure changes, then we are screwed because the selector will no longer match. We can use something like Damme, where we give the thing a name and then target it that way. Or we can say, no, we're not going to name it. We're just going to add like a bunch of classes in there, and that will style it that way. But that's not really scalable, right? So how can we select only this image and not that image? Well, that's where add scope comes into play. You say add scope from card to content. So that's like cutting out a piece of your markup. And then you select the image that is in there or the video that is in there, and you style it. So you're basically like creating a donut. You're only styling the things that are part of the donut. This is really new. It's shipped in Chrome 1.18. This is the article about it, by the way. Oh, and this was just a selection. Like, I haven't talked to you about this stuff. If you had like a second slot, I could fill the next talk with all that stuff. But that's for a future talk. So thanks again. My name is Bramus. If you have any question, ask me.